So then the standout drivers once again in Barcelona were Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. Finally split through qualifying and really fine details won this race for Max in the end on Sunday. The start was crucial. So let's have a look at Norris v Verstappen off the line. And the first thing to see is that Max lines up his car, angling slightly inwards, but over. He's going to try and go straight over this darker rubber part here to get good traction. And the actual initial start phase here for Lando and Max is pretty even, but like we saw in Imola, it's the second phase of the start where Max is able to accelerate and gets alongside Lando. So now you're trying to deliver the power, and now he's crucially got a front wing alongside the inside of the McLaren. And that means that Lando cannot cover off Max on the inside. He's given the Red Bull the chance on the inside, even if he did actually force him towards the grass. But in Barcelona, it's even trickier than that because there's a long run to the first corner. The slipstream is quite big. And you can see now George Russell, Charles Leclerc, both poised to try and launch an attack from further back on the grid, fourth and even the third row of the grid for the Ferraris as well. But it is going to be Russell that has the best chance, sweeps to the outside. And this is such a tricky position for Norris to be in particularly because he's got a car either side. How many times do we see a sandwich? 3 cars into 1, into 2, and there's a collision somewhere. So Lando backs out of it. And this is the first decisive part of the race. He gives track position to Verstappen, and he won't get that back for the whole duration of the Grand Prix. So through goes Russell. It's a really lovely move from George, gives space on the inside. Max is also quite aggressive on the inside, makes sure that he's coming past Norris, who was the big threat for him in the race, and obviously the pole sitter as well. And that means that Norris goes down to third position. If I just wind back as well, you can see a decent job that Lewis Hamilton did into this corner as well. He's been passed by both Ferraris at the start. Didn't get a good launch. He started third, could have been in position, as Russell was it, to launch an attack for the lead, given where he started. But he didn't get a good launch. But he does do well to come up the inside of Sainz firstly. Leclerc gets bulked slightly by Norris, who has to just counter his steering there as Verstappen's through on the inside, and Hamilton's back into fourth. But let's focus once again on the lead battle. Verstappen, from the inside, has to be aggressive. His starts have been very strong recently. And once again, here we go. As he's putting the throttle down, he has that overlap. Now, Lando's coming across, and this is right, let's say, on the limit from Norris, possibly over here, putting Max slightly onto the grass. But it doesn't really cost Max that crucial overlap that he's got on Lando. They're side by side. And only now, as Max goes for the inside, he'll see George Russell sweeping around the outside and into the race lead. But that's not such a big issue because the Mercedes doesn't have the pace of the McLaren. You see it on board with Russell. You see the slipstream effect is just so huge. Hamilton gets a bad start. At this point, George has actually not had as good a start even as the front row men here. He's dropped a little bit compared to Max. Now he gets a face full of grass as well. And now is the time for the slipstream round the outside. And it's such a well-measured attack from Russell. Gives the space to those on the inside. Doesn't turn in for an apex. That's what Sergio Perez tried to do in Mexico, and we know that ends in tears. And also, George has the benefit, if it all goes Pete Tong here and the 2 on the inside bulldozer in, he is the driver on the outside, and at this track, you can, if you need to, go straight through that runoff area, ideally not the gravel, but to use the tarmac and come back in at turn 3 without losing too much time. So he has that opportunity, whereas the other 2 don't. So if we go and see this one more time, what could Lando Norris have done from pole position to not lose out 2 positions? Well, firstly, there's a little bit in the start, and Lando was kicking himself about that part, but he wasn't really kicking himself too much from here. And it's a really tricky one, this one. On the face of it, you'd say he was cautious, and possibly a more aggressive approach could have worked for Lando if he just matched George on the outside. If Norris and Russell were in evenly on the brakes, Norris has the inside. He can sort of muscle Russell wide, and then you're just worried about Verstappen steaming in as well. There's a big risk involved in that, but you have a chance of keeping the lead. As it was, being cautious here maybe saved him for later on in the race, but did cost him those 2 positions, and that was the real race gone out of Lando Norris's hands. But I can understand the caution because I've been pretty much in his shoes exactly myself in the past. So this is me. Disclaimer, not on pole position, but the guy that was on pole actually stalled on the formation lap. So that's a cheap win for me. But this is in GP2 in 2014, and this has been something that we've seen so many times in Barcelona, the 3 into 1 at the first corner. I've got Stefano Colletti on my outside. I've got Mitch Evans with a whopping slipstream coming down the inside. And lo and behold, we get to this position, and I do the same thing as Lando. I'm cautious with the driver on the outside. I have a driver on the inside right up to the grass. You don't know where each of them are going to go. They're both quite aggressive, as Russell and Verstappen were. And so I do the same thing as Norris. I'm cautious. I actually have a clip of the front wing on Colletti, and then there's a bigger whack between those two. And somehow I got lucky and came through relatively unscathed with that front wing and into the lead of the race. But that's the sort of collision that we've seen so many times. And we have seen it in Formula One as well. Let's have a look back at 2017 here. And we had a 3 into 1 once again in the first corner. And this is a bigger example of what happens if 3 drivers go in there and no one is willing to back out. So we have Hamilton and Vettel looking at each other, but just behind, you've got Bottas there in the second Mercedes. Now you've got Raikkonen, and this is not for the lead of the race, but we're looking at these 3 drivers here, including Verstappen, this time on the outside with 2 fins on his inside, and they all steam in, trying to take the aggressive approach, and it just doesn't work. Bottas into Raikkonen, into Verstappen, and they're all in the wars, and the outside 2, including Verstappen, are out of the race. So Norris, on the face of it, a bit cautious, maybe lost a chance to win, but it could have been worse. If he had been aggressive, as he well commented after the race, maybe it could have ended in tears either. So that's the risk versus reward balance that you've got to have. But from pole position, exiting turn 3 in 3rd position, it's always a bit gutting. Your hard work from Saturday has been undone.
Lando Norris immediately trying to deal with Max Verstappen. He tries to chop across, but what a launch off the line that was from the World Championship leader, who's going to have an opportunity to go to the inside. Who's bravest on the brakes? Oh my word, around the outside to take the lead. George Russell, what a start. That is absolutely incredible stuff.
So that was part 1 of the job done for Max, getting ahead of Lando at the start, but it was really cemented by his move at the end of lap 2, started lap 3 on George Russell, taking advantage of the DRS being opened a lap earlier than in previous years. And Max comes out of the final corner very quickly with a huge run now on George. He's got a big speed, DRS and the slipstream. And I have to say, Russell here defends it quite nicely on the way in, covers off that inside line. You don't want to give Max the inside line. You will not see the end of the corner without the Red Bull in front. So he does the right thing. But Max knows that he has to be aggressive here. He's fired up his tyres well. The Red Bull is really good in the high-speed corners, and he's used that to his advantage coming through the final corner to get the slingshot and the momentum on the race leader as well. And he is just clinical with this move. It's really nicely done. Russell comes through. It's perfectly executed from Verstappen. There's space on the apex for George to get to. Russell runs it as hard as he can. Could he have matched Max on the brakes? Maybe, in hindsight, and forced the Red Bull driver off. But Max was so committed so late and still gave the space. This one was a brilliant move, one opportunity, and it was taken so neatly. And we can see on board with Max exactly how it played out then. He's got the run already, and now he's going to deploy a bit more energy from the battery as well. So you can see his thumb down here, going down for the button on the Red Bull steering wheel. If we play that through, you can see, there we go. And now he's just deploying everything. This is his big chance, sees the Mercedes, he's got DRS, and he's only 6 tenths behind at the line. Gets this run, and now he's going to do the George Russell move from a couple of laps before, round the outside, brilliantly done, into the lead, and more critically, with a buffer to the big threat, which was Lando Norris. And Lando couldn't make it through, had a couple of laps where he was close just after this, but that gap opened up in the first stint, and that was Max then kind of sailing towards the win, although Norris and McLaren did have the pace to make it a good race.